Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPaWrites here again, and today I wanted to talk about the interview done by PC Gamer of Destiny 2 game director Joe Blackburn because I found it absolutely fascinating. There's a ton of interesting information to go over leading up to the final shape, and I'm going to do a bit of speculation as well on what we've learned. So, jumping right in, they talk about how culminating this journey is so difficult, even in a single player game. The ending is so important, and so having this 10-year long light versus dark saga ending has to be an absolute huge moment that they cannot miss on. And we know that there are going to be 7 main campaign missions with the final shape. Normally in these other expansions we've seen there are 8. So my speculation is that after the raid is beaten, the final shape as the one big bad is finally defeated, we're then going to have a separate mission where non-raiders and everybody else can actually go through and defeat the witness, kind of like a reverse of what we saw with Oryx in the final shape, or in the Taken King, where we defeated Oryx in the campaign and then we beat him again in the raid. We're going to see that switched up. And he talks about how the witness has to be the one big bad of the universe, stronger than Oryx, stronger than every other enemy that we fought in the past. And the ending of this has to be spot on. We've seen other medias absolutely destroyed because their ending was poorly received. Think about Game of Thrones, one of the best shows of all time, because the ending was kind of poorly received and a lot of people don't like it. It's not remembered nearly as fondly as it otherwise could have. So I find that to be very interesting, and I'll be fascinated to see how this all kind of ends at the end of the day. So he also talks about how important weapons are in Destiny. It's very true that chasing new loot is vital in a game like this. The chase is good. Having new fun weapons to use for a while in your builds is also necessary. It's been hard without any kind of power cap or sunsetting or anything like that. But it's been kind of a tough balance. He talks about how not having power creep dominate the game, making the game too easy like we've seen in the past, versus having new weapons be desirable. And that's the tough part, because you can add new perks, but unless they're significantly better than what we've had in the past, our vaults are full of awesome weapons already. So chasing new things when you already have perfectly crafted forbearance can be a little bit difficult and not really desirable in the way that Bungie wants it to be. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And they say they're going to make some changes to the way we do that, make some difficult decisions. But I'll be fascinated to see how that goes. I don't think sunsetting will ever come back. I know they're doing new archetypes for a lot of different weapons, but I wonder if they worry less about power creep after the final shape once that story is done, and they can kind of just throw a lot more things at us instead of worrying about power creep as much, because you have to make those new weapons so desirable that you want to chase them regardless of what you already have in your vault. And that's very difficult to do. We have new perks coming out that are more based around team play, like heal clip, but even something like that is not super necessary with all the different options we have at our disposal. Our builds are so good, our subclasses are so good, our weapons we currently have, exotics and everything, are so good. It makes it very difficult to introduce new things that aren't going to be insanely powerful, but still lead you to want to chase them. So I think that's going to be something that is fascinating. So we'll see how that all works out ultimately, but I definitely think that changes need to be made. And yeah, they say they're not going to be any systematic changes though, like Guardian ranks with the final shape, which I think is good, because you need to be focused fully on the final shape. In my opinion, a lot of changes like that aren't really necessary. That's the same reason they talk about how Strand or a new darkness subclass isn't going to be entering the fold in the final shape, because chasing Strand, chasing Stasis in Beyond Light both kind of took away from the main story of those campaigns. And so I kind of agree with that. Plus we're entering the Traveler, so it makes sense that we're getting more light supers rather than additional darkness anything, because that's something they can add in the future when it's more of a darkness themed chase. But for now, it made absolute sense to me to have those new supers be of the light subclass because we're literally in the Traveler. So it makes a lot of sense. So it talks about how the utility of the game needs to change, and they want to do more with like team play, like for example, Galahorn or Heel Clip and stuff like that, and making it so a lot of your builds are focused on not only helping yourself but helping the squad as a whole. And with that, he kind of hints that we are going to see Well of Radiance nerfed in the future. I know a lot of people are on the fence about this. Some people want to absolutely nerf to the ground. Other people don't want it changed. For me, I do think it's had its time in the sun, and he talks about how eras are important. We've had eras where you had the rally barricades for the reload. You had the Lunafaction era where you never had to reload. And so having the Well of Radiance era end, I think, is eventually going to happen, or else you're always going to need a well on your squad regardless of what content you're running in the end game, and that's really frustrating, especially if you're a Warlock main who wants to experience new things like the new Solar Super. So I do think Well of Radiance needs a nerf. I don't know how or what they're going to do. I would actually hope for a complete rework. Maybe something like the Banner of War is the start of that rework and testing new things for that, but that's all speculation. I do think it is going to be changed, but we'll see how they do it. I know there's going to be mixed reactions with that. So he also talks about how Strand was always going to be with Lightfall and never planned for the final shape. So I think that makes sense. Talks about how we're not getting a new specific enemy type, but that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Having these big bad enemies and having one singular villain that is menacing and threatening and the biggest threat ever is more important than having a bunch of little minions that aren't really going to have that same effect that the Witness will have himself. So I think that he's correct in that personally, but we'll have to see. So Bungie confirmed that the confrontation with the Witness will take place in the Final Shapes raid, but also promised that non-raiders will experience the climax of the story. That's what I said, how it's going to be the raid first and then the Witness afterwards, my guess. But that's going to be, I'm really fascinated to see how they handle it. So he said when we did the Witness, it just didn't pass the sniff test, so we knew we needed a different strategy. So I'm curious to see how that does work. It also goes into talking about the burnout and the switch from seasons to episodes. I think 3 episodes, that change is going to be massive for the game, and I think it's a good change overall. I know not everyone's going to agree, but I do think the focus of the Final Shape should absolutely be on the final shape and not the new season that's launching the same day. I was always a little bit thrown off by that, and I wish they had changed this before, but that's just me personally. Talks about how they have not confirmed a reprise raid for next year, even though a lot of people are looking forward to having one of your old favorites come back, specifically Wrath of the Machine, but we'll see. We know we're getting 2 new dungeons, so we'll that's going to be good, but we'll see what they do with a reprised raid in the future. So, and then he talks about PvP last, going over how the studio had received mostly negative feedback about Crucible for the longest time, and because of that, the studio decided to pull back. But when he got back there to Bungie, he talked about how they needed to change that narrative to try to make Crucible for the people who are playing 20 hours a week or the people who are enjoying Crucible, while also not making Crucible mandatory for people who don't enjoy PvP. So a lot of the times I think we're going to see in the future, whether it's a PvP or an exotic quest or anything like that, that it won't really mandate that you have to play PvP, which I think is a good thing. I do think PvP is such a divisive thing in Destiny 2 that I'm always fascinated to see how they handle it. But I'm also not surprised that Bungie pulled back based on the feedback and the fact that they, no matter what they did, it seemed mostly negative. Same thing with Gambit. Gambit has been up and down always, and I've enjoyed Gambit a lot, but I know a lot of people are just not super thrilled with it, and they just don't enjoy it in general. They just play it because they feel like they have to for like seasonal challenges and stuff. So that's pretty much it with the article. I found it, again, very interesting. They did a bunch of other little things, so definitely check out the article. I just wanted to touch on the big major points there. Overall, I think the final shape is probably going to bang if I had to guess, and I do think there's going to be some interesting ideas with the future of Destiny 2 going forward with everything that we're going to see, and hopefully they make it so that way we're going to see a desire to chase weapons once again, because that is missing just a bit right now in the game. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Destiny 2 content from me going forward. My name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.